Hello. So we were cut off in our last video, and I will link that up here and at the end of this video as well. So before I start, once again, if you're here for the books, please bear with me. Make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you have the alert button on. And if you watch any of my book videos, make sure you give it a thumbs up so that when my next book video is uploading, you don't miss it. So in my last video, just a quick recap, I was reviewing my Hobonichi 2021 and how they've turned up. None of them according to plan. The plan was as in 2020, and that video I will link up here and at the end of this video as well. So before I was cut off, I was saying that the A5 this time around, I'm giving it another chance. The avec, that is, not the full book, because the full book is definitely too thick and too heavy. So the avec, I will try this time with a clearer purpose. While before, it was going to be one thing, and then once ordered, I changed my mind and I wasn't going to use it for memory keeping anymore because I felt committed to the A6 English format, mainly because I like the outer aesthetic, and I had this vision of having 5 years in a row with the spine looking out and all the years lining together, lined up together in gold at the bottom of the spine there, with the 5-year Techo, this one here, sort of closing that period of 5 years. And that 5 years is the first 5 years of the pandemic, the first 5 years of my 50th, and also the 50s, and also the first 5 years of my menopause life. So it's a very, I suppose, meaningful first 5 years. When I bought this in 2019, of course, the pandemic hasn't hit, so it was only going to be the first 5 years of my 50s. And again, when I bought this in 2019, I wasn't sure when menopause was going to hit. I think menopause is defined as having 1 year without any of your cycle returning, and that only was confirmed at the end of 2020. So anyway, so in this video, I am going to talk about how the 5 year have unfolded for me. It has been the biggest struggle. I started this really not knowing what I was doing. So what I ended up doing was repeating myself. I put my entry in the actual journal, not this one, I've filed it away, but another of the A6, such as this one here, but for 2020, and then I would go in here and repeat the same entry. Or sometimes when I am putting an entry into the, this is depending on how your process as well, and this my process, of course, all this review is relative to my own process. So when I'm putting entry here, as I put entry here, I put entry here, I would end up saying things here that I haven't said here, because your mind sort of keep going, right? And then I have to find myself coming back here to patch up, to make sure that whatever additional information I put in here is also there. And after a while, it just got too much. I was actually very, very unhappy. Instead of it working for me, I feel almost as if for the majority of the year, for the majority of 2020, I was working for it. And I really, really dislike that. And so I simply stopped. There is an entry here that I will show you. I can't show you everything because I tried selecting which parts I can show and which part I can't, and it's just too complicated. Every bit of it, there's either my own personal information or somebody else's that's quite private, I feel. So I'll show you this one to give an example. So here it says inspired to return to this, and then I dated it 13th of September. So 13th of September is right here. So this is the day that I started this Techo again. So the last entry was actually November 2020. So I stopped using this for almost a year. So where is it? This is a Japanese version, so I have to date them, which is another process that I found quite tedious, which is why the original Japanese Techo A6 I could tolerate, but it's not ideal for me because having to put the days on them as part of my routine isn't actually helpful for me. Decorating them retroactively, which I will talk about in a different video, that I found helpful. So decorating, not decorating, but putting stickers or just highlighting bits as I go is not very helpful for me. But retroactively, so going back to review the year at the end of last year, as I mark important events or things I want to highlight, I found that exercise to be helpful. So going back to this, I've put here and then I gave up. This is literally the last entry, writing this FRI Friday. It was literally my last entry, the 6th of November 2020. That was my last entry. My real actual entry, that the last actual entry that I put in was on my birthday in 2020. And there are some personal information there, so I can't show you. This is just me. I dated September. I sort of wanting to, and this is as part of my returning to this Techo, I wanted to note that at the end of 2020, I got into BTS and I found them, etc., etc. And then I flicked back through and sort of retroactively made the entry. Do you know what I mean? So that's when I realized that using this retroactively has actually been useful. So I go back and go through the year. So reflecting the year that has gone, that has passed, by putting stickers, by highlighting, and by doing it here, that has been helpful. So real-time entry, this was not working for me. So to use this in real time wasn't working for me. But as a reflective, retroactive type of tool, it has been quite interesting because no other journal, no other format offered the same capacity to this. And what I like about Hobonichi sometimes is that the simplest thing that they do make all the difference. So for example, for me, if this was just a book to gather 5 years, just a summary or a bundle of 5 years, then I probably would not have deemed it sufficiently worth my trouble and my money. But they leave this page blank. So a lot of people would put a line through and simply carry on to give more space. So then they just put a line through like this. And so for every entry, for every year, you have this whole row instead of just this one here. Now, for a long time since I first purchased it, I've always felt that this has to function more than that. If it's just for a flow through of this page, then it will effectively function as a gathering of 5 years worth of journaling. If you don't have any other journal, that's fine, but then I have this. So for me, it's a bit redundant if I have this every year and then I have one which captured 5 years of this, like a summary point. I can see how it can be useful for some people, but for me, it felt redundant. I didn't want and I do not need something like that. So what happened with this is that this provides space to reflect, to put an entry as I reflect upon the years that have unfolded here. So what I found as I go back, when I fill the entry retroactively, so for example, I flip through January and then I look through what unfolded March, April, May, and my uncle passing away, the pandemic hit, the closing down of the country, our whole life changing, and all the rest of it. And there's one entry that says, speaking to so-and-so, or have spoken to so-and-so, and so-and-so have passed away at the end of 2020 or early 2021. So what I found myself doing was right underneath it saying, so-and-so passed by 2021, early 2021 or late 2020, right underneath it. So in a sense, the entry underneath it is not really anything to do with what happened that day in 2021, on that day and on that date in the year 2021, but really more a commentary on what I've entered on the same date last year. So I suppose then that can only work if you are using this not so much as a memory keeping place, but more as kind of a meta. So this page here for me allows the journal exercise or the journaling activities here to be a bit more meta. In that sense, it isn't strictly memory keeping. It is also quite reflective. So If it's just a gathering of memories accumulated 5 years, to me personally, it's an extra work that I personally don't see the point of, because I have them already here. I will have them in 5 book lined up. If I want to go to any of the year, I could simply look at the year at the spine there and just go to it. So the essential part of making this work is having to step away from strictly memory keeping into more of a reflective journaling. And for me personally, there is a danger of going down the road of emotional processing journaling, which I found no longer work for me at this point in my life. When I was 15, in my teenage years, journaling, processing my emotion was very cathartic, was very helpful. I found that when I started doing that again recently, it was very unproductive. It put me through a loop that I couldn't get out of. And what I found cathartic nowadays is actually blogging. Whether people actually read my blog or not, the idea that someone might, the idea that it's out there in the open for any public to find, give me a sense of accountability to this invisible potential audience that may or may not exist. But it helped me discipline my thought processes and my emotional processes to a point where I could be productively moving forward using certain insights that I've gained. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to explain it other than I'll do another video when I figure out what that was about. But so reflecting here then, in a sense like this one here, let me show you another one. Right, so here you could see that I've entered this on 16th of September and just sort of reflecting about how emotional it is to go through last year, and I didn't realize how I felt at the time. I didn't realize how things were really, and now I have the perspective of a year to look through it again. This is actually, so the 16th of September here was 16th of September 2020, and then 16th of September 2021. And then I just sort of, it's basically a commentary on how I see my entry between 16th of September 2020 and 16th of September 2021, because the person I was talking to, as per the entry 16th of September 2020, is now gone. And in 16th September 2021, I've said as much, that this person is now gone. And this is kind of a commentary on, you know what I mean? So I know it sounds kind of convoluted. I really don't know how else to explain it. But in some weird way, if you are reflective in a sort of retroactive, okay, the keywords are this: reflective, retroactive, and meta. And that can work really, really well. And so I'm not saying you should do it one way or another, but I'm just telling you that that's how it's been working for me. And the other thing that's really important is that if you find yourself not filling it up, I've heard at least a couple of people saying, oh, I'm going to buy a new 5-year because I failed to write for months and there's this big blank section, and that's kind of like a fail, so you want to start again afresh. To me, I stopped for a year. There's a whole blank page of the whole between November to September. November 2020 to September 2021 is empty. So what I will do is either leave them empty as a record, because to me non-entry is entry. So to me blank pages are themselves an entry to memory keeping journaling, even reflective journaling. The empty spaces to me is speaking as much. Or I will do retroactive journaling so that I go back and reflect on the year and I fill it up, not in real time, but I fill it up according to my reflection based on what happened here in 2021. So let's say 16th of September such and such happened, and then above there you'll see 16th of September last year 2020, and you reflect on the blank page on that side. Where was it? So going back, as you look at your journal, this is entry, real-time entry, and you put retroactive entry here. So let's say 16th of November, and we are now, let's say, in December. Then you see what happened there, and you see what happened there, and sort of making an entry that, well, by 2021, you know, this person had passed away, and I didn't realize that, and a year later I actually feel better. And then here I would say it's interesting to see what a year have unfolded and why a year have changed. Perhaps it's because now I don't know, the pandemic is a great equalizer, and perhaps due to that, then perhaps you know that, you know. So here I'm reflecting on what happened between the 6th of November 2020 and the 6th of November 2021. And entry here is not just a repeat of what happened in the 6th of November 2021 based on the real-time journal, but also an entry point that is responding and reflecting with what has happened between that and that. So there is this interaction, and then there is that interaction. And then here, potentially, there's that interaction, and then that interaction, and then that interaction. Does that make any sense? So in that sense, if that is how it can work for you, which is the only way this can work for me, because otherwise, as I said, it's redundant, it's duplication that is unnecessary for me, then this is probably the best thing I've ever tried to do, or the best thing I've ever acquired, because I wanted the pretty cover. Not this cover, there's this linen cover, decorated, embroidered with flowers and birds and such. In the end, that cover is just way too delicate for me to use. It's just not functional. So in the end, I just use it like this. I can put in 2 pens rather than just the one. I don't like putting 2 pens in the 2 loops, because if I'm going to be bothered with that loops, the Hobonichi loop, you know, the 2, this one here, I want it to close the book. I don't like it flapping around with I know some people put 2 pens there. I don't like it. I prefer to do it like that. But it means it's just, yeah, it's pretty, but it's just very, very delicate. The thing is, this 5-year journal isn't something that I travel with, not likely. It is more like a bedside, nightstand, sort of tabletop. The way it works has been like that. So a more delicate cover should be okay, but that was just way too delicate. And I can't put cover and cover on it, I don't think, because it won't fit. So that's how I've used that. So yeah, so don't be afraid of not putting any entry. If you don't feel called to put an entry, if the need isn't there, it should serve you. You shouldn't be serving it. So if the need isn't there to reach for it, just leave it. I left it for a whole year. It's 5 years. If you need to leave it for 2 years, leave it for 2 years. And then when you feel moved to reach for it again, reach for it again. And the empty spaces are also records as far as I'm concerned. And so I don't see blank pages as a waste. I saw those blank pages as a waste and as a failure for the A5 AVEC January to June, because there's absolutely no purpose. It was moving from planner to mood tracking to financial tracking to, I mean, it's a whole podge of stuff. So the failure wasn't so much the blank spaces, but the lack of purpose of that A5 that I was talking about in the last video. Here, the purpose is pretty much set for you, and there's only so much space in there anyway. So if you don't fill it, you don't fill it. And then at the end of the 5 year, what I'm saying is that don't, if you buy 2020 to 2024, I personally feel that there is no need to then buy again in 2021, because you feel that you failed the 2020 to 2024 because you haven't filled all the pages, all the sections, and because you haven't marked all the entries. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah, it's quite difficult to try to explain what I mean and not being able to flip through it. I admire people who's able to flip through their planners and their journals, because mine is pretty messy, as you can see from my cat journal. They're pretty scratchy. There's no decoration, nothing. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. If you have any question, put it down below and I will get to it as soon as I can. Bye. Thanks for watching.